fuck do you want?
What do you want?
To talk to some non-British fucker. Damn. All right, what's up,
Why did you drag me in here?
Well, actually, Cake did. I wasn't ever going to. I was just gonna leave you hanging, but... All right, what's up,
I thought
buddy?
you were. Nothing really. It's just like I posted a big wall of text, but the chat didn't accept it, so...
Good.
That's why yeah. You feel good about that, don't you?
So what's up, my dude?
Okay, so... As I've preached this before, I don't really see the usefulness in, and this might trigger you, in like criticizing Sargon so much. Because as I said before, like you want to be criticized, if you want to be looking or investigating arguments, then you should be looking at the best possible formulation of the arguments, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the nuance that I described in my big wall of text is that, so ideally, if you want to represent Sargon's arguments in the best possible way, then you should probably be looking towards Jeff's formulation of the arguments.
Sure, but
the problem,
my
just let me finish.
Oh yeah,
just
go ahead. Okay.
Sure, but at the same time, there's such a disjunction of ways that we can interpret Sargon's arguments. It completely skews whether or not JF's representation of the argument is meaningfully refers to Sargon's representation of the argument, right?
Sure. So my point about anything that I've been arguing with actually isn't even related at all to Sargon's arguments. It's more, my point was related to Sargon's methodology, right? I'm not really, like, what was the most recent disagreement over even? I don't even remember at this point. Do you remember what it was? What did Sargon say?
No, this is not something I follow very much. The last thing I clocked into was...
What? Oh, it had to do with whether or not Sargon reads sources, right? So that was my problem. So my argument with Sargon had nothing to do, it wasn't even with Sargon.
Yeah.
I was just sniping this tweet, right? My argument had nothing to do with whether or not this FBI thing actually happened and giving the strongest representation of whether or not that it, right? My argument had to do with, I don't believe that Sargon reads sources that he talks about on his YouTube videos, right? In which case, there is no charitability to be applied to anything he's saying, right? I'm more just trying to reasonably assess whether or not I believe, right, via inductive reasoning, which is what we have to use, right, whether or not he reads his sources. And I think that I sufficiently provided enough proof for my claim that he doesn't. Do you disagree with that? Or do you think there is a more charitable way to read his messaging, to make it seem like he genuinely does read the things that he talks about?
Yeah, so... Last time I watched this, I watched your Minecraft video, and I think that's when you hashed out that whole argument. And no, I think from what you posted, I pretty much agree.
So here's like a quick summary, okay? Sargon very smugly believed in a fact, okay? And because he believed in this fact, okay, the reason why he smugly believed in it was because of a source that he cited, okay, document X, all right? So he cites document X. He appeals to the authority of document X several times. This is the FBI. It can't be wrong. It's not conspiracy, right? And then he cites that document to provide proof for a fact, right? Well, I looked at that same document, and in the very first paragraph of that document, it literally says nothing here was ever verified. Period. Nothing was verified, right, is what that document said. So via inductive reasoning, right, I assume, okay, I guess Sargon never actually read this document. I think it's a safe assumption to make, right? I don't see how, like, if we're talking charitable interpretation at this point, right, then we're going to have to go into the realm of maybe Sargon had a stroke before he made the video. Maybe somebody held Sargon at gunpoint when he made the video, right? Like, these are the types of alternatives that we have to begin to investigate, because I don't see how you get Sargon having read that document and stating several times something that the document does not state otherwise. Can you help me with that, or?
No, I think that's correct. It's just like, so the focus for you is not to attack Sargon's arguments. It's to attack the means by which he acquires his conclusions.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. So. Yeah. No, I just agree. Like, I don't think there's anything really to discuss there, because it's either he doesn't read the arguments well, or he doesn't read the articles well, or he just doesn't read the articles at all.
Destiny
right?
got destroyed by that fact.
You can go about
Donation via
Amazon
Dash
third
button.
wheel here
Sure,
I can identify.
and that other thing that you brought up, that could be an alternative as well. Perhaps Sargon does read, but his reading comprehension is at such a low level that he's not able to glean any useful information out of something that's written past like a 4th grade level or something, right? That is a possibility. Sure.
Sounds bad.
No, well, I mean, sure, that's a possibility that he reads things but he doesn't understand them. But that's not a concession JF is ever making, right? He was never going to say like, oh yeah, maybe Sargon reads something but he just doesn't understand it, right? Because I would be content with that alternative as well. Like, okay, sure, yeah, we could take that. Maybe but because the conclusion is the same either way, though, for me, and that you probably shouldn't take anything Sargon says at face value without additional research because he's proven himself an unreliable reader, right? Whether that's because he doesn't read things or because he reads them and doesn't understand them, that doesn't really change my conclusion either way, you know?
Yeah, for sure. But I think that, God, I don't want to get into a huge discussion on this. But the thing is, you can't take that reasoning by in virtue. Okay, so this is. Have you heard of the fallacy of inductive reasoning, or the reasons why inductive reasoning is circular?
No,
Have you
go
heard of
for
that
it.
kind of argument?
Go
Okay,
for
so it's the idea that because inductive reasoning isn't a valid form of reasoning, if, for example, I made the observation that the sun is going to come up tomorrow, and I did that for like several years, so I used that to conclude my hypothesis that the sun is going to come up tomorrow, right? That doesn't necessarily prove that the sun is going to come up the next day, because the observation is only based on those past. So then for you to criticize Sargon, maybe, of all his past videos, doesn't necessarily show that the next video he won't have read the article.
So if we were trying to make so now I'm bullshitting a little.
You see what I'm saying?
No, I understand what you're saying, right? So like I would never say that like it is a scientific fact, or I can say it with 100% philosophical certainty that the next video Sargon produces will indeed be unreliable, right? I can't say that with absolute certainty, but I believe that it's fair, and I don't know how you would phrase this. I think it's fair that I would view Sargon as an untrustworthy source of information due to how he's conducted himself in the past, right?
I mean, I wouldn't view him as a source of information.
Well, but a lot of people do, right?
Yeah, I think that's just the wrong way about it. Yeah, no, I think
also,
that
isn't technically
responsibility.
Isn't our view of science period a little bit inductive? Like isn't all of science built around the idea that if something in physics is operated in some way, it will probably continue to operate in some way? Isn't all our entire understanding of science kind of built around that assumption? Isn't that a little bit circular or axiomatic, maybe?
Yeah, that's basically what science is. Yeah.
Sure. So like so yeah, I mean, like, and
That's
again,
the
like,
philosophical problem.
sure, and again, like, if this was presented to me in this way, then like I could agree that like, sure, I'm not going to make the statement of like absolute fact, right? I mean, it is possible, right? But I think you would agree with my assertion that you probably, like, as a layman or whatever, you should never be taking something that Sargon says at face value, right? Due to his history of being, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Sure.
It makes it difficult to quantify.
Yeah, sure. It is
video
difficult to
is gonna-
quantify, but I think that it's really dishonest to try to use ways to wiggle around that and to like this idea that like inductive reasoning isn't actually like a valid form of like maybe not like in an ultra rigorous sense, right? But if let's say that you've got a boyfriend or girlfriend, they go out 10 nights in a row, and every single night they go out to this bar, they get drunk and they cheat on you, right? And then they go out on the 11th night in a row, and you find out they're going to that bar, and you're like, hey, I don't want you to go there. Like, I think you're going to cheat on me. And they're like, well, actually, that is only inductive reasoning. You have not provided sufficient proof.
And that's how my relationships ended.
Right. Sure, but I'm just saying, right? Like that you can't actually like you can't claim in every single circumstance, right? Because sometimes inductive reasoning is kind of the best we have. Like realistically, we can't provide 100% physical proof for every single assertion we've ever made in an online form, right? That's not really, or even past that, right? Like nobody has a camera on some person. You just kind of have to make your best guess on how a person acts, you know, and then kind of deduce from there, right?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, it would be unlikely that Sargon will, like, this is me being, like, really anal, I guess.
Sure. Oh, yeah, sure. But the big problem that I had with Jeff is it seems like he doesn't want to be anal in both directions. For instance, he told me that it wasn't fair for me to say that that Sargon hadn't read the article, but then he provides a video from 2 years ago where Sargon has the article on the YouTube screen, and he's like, well, here's evidence that he did read the article. And it's like, well, hold on. You're just using inductive reasoning here, but you told me that I wasn't allowed to do it, right? That seems very hypocritical, no?
Yeah, like, so one of the things I don't like about what JF does is that he narrows down on probably what he thinks, what Sargon thinks, right? Or it seems to be the case that he narrows
and then
down on.
works his way back from there or whatever.
Yeah, so you'll zone in on one interpretation, which is probably a really good way of representing the issue. I think generally, from what I've seen, he does that pretty well. But then that doesn't necessarily mean that's Sargon's way of looking at things, because there could be many. So there's a disjunction. There's many different ways, like 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5, because of the way Sargon puts things, right?
Sure.
Generally, when I watch Sargon's videos, if ever, I always see that like he'll use really vague language, which is kind of the problem you have, right? He's a very vague.
Yeah, but I don't consider that to be a mistake. I consider that to be, that's what people do when they don't really know what they're talking about, right? Is you be as vague as possible because you don't actually have all the details, right?
Well, that's what I consider to be inaccuracy. And then JF comes along and he gives him a really strong representation, like the one you were just talking about, right? Because with what was the last thing on that Reddit
about
thread?
the lady in the council housing.
Yeah. So with this interpretation of council housing, right? JF's tried to strengthen his argument by giving him
and this is literally like
be charitable, quote unquote, by giving him this good representation, but that doesn't necessarily mean of all of the possible representations or interpretations of Sargon's argument that this is the one that Sargon meant.
Yeah, and
That's
this is
not
literally
semantically encoded.
This is like the
sense.
dream argument pairer to like Sargon. It's like Sargon goes out, makes a ton of videos being as disingenuous or as vague as possible in the hopes that somebody like JF comes along and then like will give him the most favorable interpretation on the most non-statements like ever made in the history of all of statements, you know?
Yes, the philosophical question there is really, can you guarantee that's what Sargon meant? Can you guarantee that's the interpretation we want to put to?
Which is my other problems. Like, do you think that Sargon really meant that when he said this probably happened, do you think he really meant like there was a greater than 0.0001% that this happened while simultaneously calling the guy that he's arguing against a fucking idiot? Do you really think that's a reasonable like that? Yeah. And then that's when Jeff's like, well, actually, if you go to the dictionary and you look up the word probability, it's like, okay, dude.
Yeah, so that's just that's the thing. Like, so the question you can ask Jeff, can you guarantee this is what Sargon meant? Right? He can't. I don't think he can.
Sure, but then his response would just be that, like, well, can you guarantee what he meant, right? If you can't prove your point and I can't prove my point, then we're just left building the best argument that we can for Sargon or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, and then you're representing the argument as best you can, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's Sargon's argument.
Sure.
We then separate the argument from whatever Sargon meant to mean, right? Because in the end of the day, Sargon of Akkad isn't the argument. Sargon of Akkad is Sargon of Akkad, right? He's not all of the things he says. So
yeah.
This idea that there's a disjunction of ways you can look at Sargon's argument means that, sure, you could pick from one of this disjunction, but there's all these other possible interpretations, so to then pin Sargon down to one of them is meaningless.
Sure.
So that's basically what I was trying to say in however many characters your chat provides.
Well, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, so like that's the point. I just think JF's wrong about that. No, it's not that JF's wrong. It's that JF
is being disingenuous a little bit.
I wouldn't say disingenuous. I think it's okay to like pick out an interpretation and just like want to represent the strengths of the argument, but then to assign that this is what Sargon meant.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's where the disingenuity.
That's simply untrue.
It's okay to say that, like, you know, like, well, let's look at this argument. This is very interesting. You know, let's analyze this argument. But he doesn't do that. He takes it a step further and he goes, oh, well, this is undoubtedly what Sargon meant, and he's actually a genius for saying it in such a way. And it's like, okay, well, that's probably
which is untrue.
Yeah, probably not true.
No, it is untrue.
Well, we don't technically know that. I guess there is a possibility that Sargon is actually somewhat of a genius or something, you know.
That's the thing. Like, we go back to this thing that you say with Donald Trump, right? You can only know what people mean with what they say. Yeah. Like, it's not like I have a magic meaning fucking antenna that like dials into fucking Sargon's mind and like hacks my way through his fucking rhetoric. Yeah. Holy shit. You know, I don't have that facility. I don't want it. Damn. Okay. Yeah, so that's basically all I wanted to like kind of say. Yeah.
All right, well, hey, buddy, I love you. It's been fun.
You can get rid of me now. You don't need to deal with British people anymore.
Sure. Stay safe, buddy. Be careful.
You too.